Welcome to the Workshop Selector project using Visual Basic. My name's Dan McElroy and I'm going to give you a sample solution for the project. Part of the problem is that some instructors may want the students to figure this whole thing out for themselves. So the code for the project that I am providing is only available on the website for my students. This project is taken from Starting Out with Visual Basic by Gaddis and Irving. This is from Chapter 5. This is really a cool project. If I look at it, it has two tables, and then we have to do some computation based on the information that's in these tables. Here's how the project works. I am going to be covering the project definition, a sample project execution, different implementation strategies, a discussion on list boxes, a discussion on arrays, and sample implementation of the project. Here is a definition of the project showing the two different tables. We have the workshop table with 5 different workshops. Now, each workshop has a set number of days and a registration fee. For example, handling stress is a 3-day workshop and the registration fee is $595. If I go down and look at negotiation, this workshop is a 5-day workshop and the registration fee is $1,295. We also have to pick a location where we're going to attend the workshop. For example, Chicago, the lodging fees per day are $125, but if we go to the workshop in Phoenix, the lodging fees are only $92 a day. Here are some samples. For example, if I pick time management in Orlando, I'll select time management, I'll select Orlando, and then when I say add workshop, I get a summary of the cost and everything for the workshop. The summary for the list of costs for time management workshop in Orlando, it has time management, registration fee is $695, location Orlando, $3 at $100, the lodging fees are $300, and this workshop cost a total of $995. I can use a calculator and verify that the program is computing the prices accurately. I'm going to pick a second workshop. Here's negotiation in Chicago, and then I'll add the workshop and I'll have the list of costs for the second workshop. The first one was $995 and the second workshop is $1,920. When I click the Calculate Total button, I can see the total of both workshops. That's $995 plus $1,920, and the grand total for both workshops is $2,915. When I click the Reset button, the workshop selection is cleared, the location selection is cleared, the list of costs is cleared, and the total cost is cleared. I also need to make sure that the Exit button closes the program. Here's a hypo chart, hierarchical input, process, output. For the inputs, I have the workshop selection and the location selection. The output is going to be the workshop summary information and a total. For processing, on the workshop, I need to look up in the table the number of days and the registration fee. For location, I need to look up the lodging fees. When I have both of those informations, I can compute the cost of the workshop and then accumulate it into the total. There are many ways of implementing this project. I could use lots of if-else statements. I could get the data from a set of parallel arrays. I could get the data from a multi-dimension arrays, or I could even get the data from an array of structured records. I highlighted selection number 3 because this is the option that I'm going to be using when I implement the project in this video. So, option number 1, pros and cons. we could use a whole set of if-else statements for each workshop possibility to determine the number of days and registration fees, and another set of if-else statements for the location to determine the daily charge for lodging. Here's just a little piece of the program. For example, the number of days I have as an integer and registration as a double, and my workshop selection is an integer, and I get that from the list box to find out which item was selected in the list box. So if the workshop selection is a 0, that means the first selection. That's handling stress. I set days equal 3 and registration 595. Otherwise, if the workshop selection is number 1, then somebody would have selected time management. The days would have been 3 and the registration is 695. I'd have to repeat this sequence for each workshop and then do another set of if-else statements for the location. Here's a couple of problems. The program will be very large, very repetitive, and easy to make errors when the program is entered. Another problem is that the data for the workshops and the location are not separated from the code. The program will be very large and very repetitive and easy to make errors when the program is entered. The data for the workshops and locations are not separated from the code. It's all merged in together, and the program is going to be difficult to maintain. If the order of the workshops is changed or we insert a new workshop, then we have to go change the code for the program, because 0, 1, 2, 3, we're looking at 0, the index position is hard-coded into the program, and we have to go change all of those if a new workshop is entered or one is deleted. Here is option number 2, a set of parallel arrays. For example, for workshop, I could have one array of strings for the workshop, another array of integers for the number of days, and then another array of type double for the registration fee. Now what I have is right here is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's 5 workshops. So if somebody selected time management, then I'd use index 1 for the workshop, and then I'd use index 1 into the days to find out it's 3 days, and then I'd use the same index for the registration, 695. I'd do the same thing for the location and the lodging fees. To code the parallel arrays, I'd say dim workshop, open close parentheses, a string equals open curly brace, quote handling stress, quote comma, quote time management, quote comma, quote supervision skills, quote comma, quote negotiation, quote comma, quote how to interview, quote, and a close curly brace. That's how I'd code up the information for the workshop. Then dim days, open close parentheses to indicate I'm using an array. Then as integers, then equals, open curly brace, 3, 3, 3, 5, 1, close curly brace. Do the same type of thing for registration, location, and lodging. Using parallel arrays can be difficult to use and maintain. For example, if negotiation is selected, the index position in the array is 3. We need to save that value and then use it to look up the number of days at index position 3 in a different array and registration at index position 3 in another array. Similar technique can be used for location and lodging. Since workshop days and registration are not grouped together but defined separately, any changes or additions may result in the 3 arrays no longer being synchronized. How about working with a multi-dimensioned array? If I have a multi-dimensioned array, then handling stress, the number of days, and the price are all grouped together. Time management, the days, and the price are all grouped together. Same for each workshop. Now, the nice thing about this is if I add another workshop, I just enter another line. If I delete a workshop, all the information for that workshop is still contained on the same line. Looking at multi-dimensioned arrays, we're almost getting into the position of working with a database. I have another double-dimensioned array for the location. Here, it doesn't matter If I add or delete a workshop, I just add or delete lines in the array. This makes it easy to maintain because all the data for the workshop information is in one table and all the data for the location information is another table. One of the problems with multi-dimensional arrays is that all the data in every cell must be the same data type. For example, if I create an array of strings, then all the data in each cell must be a string. That won't be too hard because if it's a string, we can always take that data and convert it into integers and doubles. An array of structured records is really cool, but I'm not going to cover it here. It's one more complication that I don't need to introduce at this time. The nice thing about structured records is that each field within a record can be a different data type and could even be an object or another Visual Basic control such as a label or a text box. Next thing I want to cover is a discussion on list boxes. We have the list box control. The index is the position in the list box which is going to identify the contents. Some of the things that we can do is we can add items into the list box. We can find out what the count is and how many items are in the list box, and we can clear the list box. There are a bunch of other things we can do also that I'm not covering at the moment. Here are some of the properties and methods for the list box. For example, if I name a list box as LST Workshop, using LST to indicate it's a list box, the index starts from 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this example there are 5 items in LST Workshop. The index values go from 0 through 4. So the highest index value is 1 less than the number of items in the list box. Here are some things. If I say lstworkshop.items.count, that is going to return a 5 because there's 5 items. In the example here, negotiation is selected. So if I say lstworkshop.selectedIndex, I get a 3 because that's number 3. The program can also set these properties. lstworkshop.selecteditem.toString returns negotiation because that's the text for the selected item. These properties can either be read by the program or set by the program. For example, the selected index is a -1 if no items are selected. The program can also set this property to a -1 so that no items are selected. Here are a couple methods. If I say listBox and whatever the name of the list box is, I give the name of the list box and say .items.add, and then in parentheses I put a string. That is going to add the item to the end of the list box. For example, lstworkshop.items.add, open parentheses, quote, employee evaluation, quote, close parentheses, is going to add employee evaluation to the end of the list. There are other methods where you can insert things in the middle. Another method is .items.clear. That will clear the contents of a list box. If I wanted to clear LST Workshop, I could say lstworkshop.items.clear, open close parentheses. Now let's look at some arrays. We'll look at array basics, index and size, member methods such as length, get length, upper bound, sort. We'll look at parallel arrays and multi-dimensioned arrays. For a single dimension array, I have index and length. For example, if I say dim scores 10 as integer, that's going to declare an empty array of 10 integers. So I have 10 elements in the scores array. The index values are going to go from 0 through 9. For example, I could say scores, open parentheses 7, close parentheses. I could also call that scores sub 7 equals 99. That's going to put a 99 in location 7. I can also get the data from an array element. For example, dim x is integer. I could say x equals scores sub 7. Now the variable x becomes a 99 because I'm going to read that value from the array. We can also initialize an array at compile time. Dim scores, open close parentheses, as integer equals, open curly brace, and then a whole list of integers, each separated by a comma. The end of the list is indicated with a curly brace. Now, in this case, the size of the array is determined by the number of elements in the initialization list. The size is not specified when declaring the array. I don't want to say dim scores open parentheses 10 close parentheses is integer, because the size of the array needs to be determined by the number of elements that are being initialized. Curly braces are used around the data that goes in the array, and commas separate each data item. Scores.length returns the size of the array. In this example, I could say dim count as integer equals scores.length, and what happens is I get a 10. Now notice the index values go from 0 through 9, so the highest index value that's possible is going to be 9 because we're counting from 0. The highest index value is 1 less than the size. I can also initialize an array during runtime. If I wanted to set every element in the array to a 0, for example, I could declare an integer and name it I. I'm going to use I as the index into the array. So for I equals 0 to scores.length minus 1. Scores of I equals 0. Next I. This is going to set every element in the array to a 0. The values going into each element of the array do not need to be set to 0. They can be set to any value that you wish. For example, you might even want to read the data from a disk file and then store that data into the array. Here is another example. Dim workshop open close parentheses indicating I'm declaring an array as string equals open curly brace. Then I can put all the data in there: handling stress, time management, supervision skills, negotiation, how to interview, and a close curly brace. Notice that each one has quotes around it because they are strings. Dim count as integer equals workshop.length. I'm going to get a 5. Dim value as string equals workshop2. That's going to give me workshop skills is going to go into the variable called value. How about if I said dim value as string equal workshop sub 5? Well, I'm out of bounds. So the index values only go from 0 to 4. How about working with a multi-dimensioned array? Right now I have a 2-dimensioned array. Going down is going to be each record, and going across is going to be each field. Here I have workshop. Dim workshop list, open parentheses, comma, close parentheses. The comma goes inside the parentheses to indicate that I'm declaring a multi-dimensioned array. Then as string equals open curly brace, and all the way at the bottom I have another close curly brace. For each item that goes into the array, I have an open curly brace, all the data members, and a closed curly brace, and then a comma. So if I look at that closely, I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 rows, and each row has 3 items. To get something out of the double-dimensioned array, for example, if I wanted a workshop, I could say dim workshop as string equals, I have a variable now called workshop, workshop list 3, 0. So that's going to be in row 3, that's really the 4th row, but index position 3, sub 0, and 0 is going to be the first field on that row. I get negotiation. If I say dim days as string equals string workshop list 3, 1, I'm going to get a 5, but remember I'm getting strings. How about if I wanted an integer? I could say dim days as integer equals cint, means convert to integer, workshop list 3, 1. Now I get a numeric 5. I get a 5 that's an integer, not a string. Here are some more cool things about multi-dimensioned arrays. Rank returns the number of dimensions. In this case, it's a 2. It's a 2-dimensioned array. Length returns the total number of elements for all the dimensions. Since this is a 5 by 3 array, length returns 15. GetLength returns the number of elements for a specified dimension. For example, if I want dimension 0, that's going to be the number of workshops. In this case, it's 5. 0 through 4 Gives me a 5 for the get length. If you're used to working with a database, when you declare a table, each field has a name and a data type. But with arrays, with a multi-dimensioned array like this double-dimensioned array example here, every element in the array has the same data type, and the rows just go from 0 to length -1, and the columns just go across for the number of columns that you've declared, -1. It would be nice if we could just give each of these fields a name, and our program would be a little bit more self-documenting. I could use enumeration, but I don't want to cover that at the moment. I don't want to add more complexity to the project. Here I'm defining the field names with some constants. For example, I could say const workshop name as integer equals 0 because that's field number 0. Const workshop days as integer equals 1. Const workshop price as integer equals 2. For example, if I have dim selection as integer equals 4, that's going to be how to interview. I could say workshop list selection, comma, workshop price, and that's going to give me 395. And that's better than saying workshop list selection, comma, 2, because even though I get the same thing, 2 is a magic number. If somebody's looking at the program later, they're going to wonder what a 2 is. Not only that, if we ever add another field, we'd have to go through the program and make sure that all the 2's got changed to something else, and we didn't accidentally change some of the 2's that aren't supposed to be changed. One of the nice things about the newer versions of Visual Basic is when we declare an array of strings, we can put something in the declaration that's not even a string, for example an integer, and Visual Basic will actually go and convert that integer into a string for us. We can use a shortcut version when we're declaring the first item in the list. I could use a shortcut way of defining the data for the array. For the first item, I could have open curly brace, quote, handling stress, quote, comma, 3, comma, 595, close curly brace, comma, and then keep going on and defining the rest of them. These newer versions of Visual Basic, since this is a string, that's going to take the 3 and convert it into a string as the character 3. And the 595, instead of being 595, since it's declared as a string, it's going to be converted into a string value, character 5, character 9, character 5. Then we can use like cint and cdouble when accessing these pieces of data, convert them back into numeric data if we need them for math operations. Let's look at designing and building the program. There's 3 things we need to consider. First, we have to place all the controls on the form. One of the things that happened when I did this, I had to adjust the size of some of those list boxes in order to fit all the data and make it look nice on the form. So once you put it together and you run it a few times, then make sure everything sort of fits. The next thing we have to do is, once we put the controls on the form, we need to give a name for each control that's being used in the code. Then we need to enter the code. When developing the program and giving names to each of the controls on the form, I selected names that I thought were descriptive. You can choose any name you wish, but you have to remember that whatever name you choose, that's the same name that you have to use when you're writing the code. Here is an organization chart for the workshop program. Starting off, I have my form. I also have my global data. The global data is something that can be accessed by anything in the program. The form load event handler gets activated when the form first loads. That's when the program first starts. I also have event handlers for add workshop, calculate total, reset, and exit. These are the controls and the names that I used when creating the project. I set the name property for the form to FRM workshop selector. Notice there's no spaces in names. When I looked real close at the example shown in the book, I see that they used 3 group boxes and put the list boxes inside the group boxes. When you create your project, you could put 3 group boxes on your form and then put a list box inside each group box. Or you could just put the list boxes right on the form and then put a label above the group box to indicate what the box is for. When I created my version of the project, I put 3 group boxes. The first one I named GRP Pick Workshop, and inside that group box I put a list box. The name I gave to that list box was LST Workshop. Right next to it I have another group box that's called GRP Pick Location. Inside that group box I put a list box that says LST Workshop. And then over at the end I have another one that's GRP List of Costs, and then inside that group box I have another list box that says LST List of Costs. Below all that stuff I have a label that says Total Cost. I set the text property for label 1 to Total Cost. I didn't even bother giving this label a name because it's not being used by the program. I'm going to use a label to display the total cost when somebody clicks the Calculate Total button. I'll use a label instead of a text box because I don't want the user to go and change the information there. I only want the program to put data there. I'm going to try to make this label look like a text box by setting auto size to false and border style to fixed 3D. Once I have placed all of the controls on the form and given them names, I can look at the list right over on the side on the Properties window. The second row has the name of the selected control. Over to the side is a little tiny down arrow, and when you click this you will get a list of all the controls and all the objects that are on the form and their names. You can use this list to select an individual control or find out the list of the names. This is a good way to make sure that you have everything that you want and you don't have extra stuff that you would like to get rid of. Here's where I defined my global data. Notice it's after public class and then the name of my class. I have dim total fees as double. This is a variable. This way all the different subroutines can go and update it, or I can look at it. I have a definition for my workshop list array, and then I have the field names defined. I do the same thing for the location array and for the field names. The rest of the code for this project is available on the class website for my sections of Visual Basic Programming. If you're taking the class from another instructor may wish you to generate all the code on your own. So I hope you enjoyed the part that I have described, and I hope you found it useful. Have a wonderful day programming in Visual Basic.